Welcome to ZekeTalk. My name is Jim Tudor, and I'm with Robert Hornak today, and we are going to be talking about Sam Peckinpah's 1974 film, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Robert, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? How's your head?
Oh, my head is still attached, thankfully, but you know, and you as well.
I feel good. Yeah, I'm excited that we're doing this. ZekeTalk being a relatively new thing at ZekeFilm. I'm intrigued by the whole thing, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, for those who don't know, Robert is one of our regular reviewers of Blu-rays. Mainly, he reviews a lot of classic Blu-rays that pass through our midst, and you know, is quite good at it. So you can jump over to our website, which I'll plug right now, ZekeFilm.org, ZekeFilm.org, and read his work, and you can read my work as well. It's fun. And everybody else's. There's gosh, we've got, I don't know, 12 or 15 contributors from all over the place, contributing great work all the time about movies, and more Zeke Talk episodes as well.
Yes.
But like we said, this one is special because it's about a Sam Peckinpah film that I'll just come right out and say it's my favorite Sam Peckinpah film.
Oh, is that right? I didn't think about this. I just watched the movie again this morning, and so I'm just going to go ahead and say it's my favorite too, because it's the freshest on my mind. It's very enjoyable. It's dark. It's gritty. It's got everything I love about anything 70s film, early 70s film. So yeah, it's absolutely my favorite of all time.
Of all time of Sam Peckinpah.
The truth is, I like. I'm not. At the outset, I'll say that I'm not a Sam Peckinpah aficionado or expert by any means. I haven't seen all of his films, including some that are pretty high profile, like Cross of Iron. I've never seen. I've never seen Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. I've never seen Junior Bonner. There's a few more that I haven't seen. I guess I've seen the biggest names of his movies, including this one. But my favorite, I'll renege everything I just said. I'll say that my favorite Sam Peckinpah movie is actually Ride the High Country, an early Western of his, also featuring War Notes. But I love the movie, and I'll tell you why, if you don't mind me going off on that brief tangent. I love that movie.
As a predecessor.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
so predecessor. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I love Ride the High Country because A, I love Westerns, but B, you can tell. I don't know the derivation of the movie, like exactly where it came from, if it was his idea or what. But the story is kind of a standard 50s, early 60s kind of Western. It's about two guys, Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea, who are going up the hill to the mining country to retrieve gold to take down to the bank for safekeeping. So you can see all the kind of the dangers and, you know, innate in that sort of scenario and the kind of things that they have to battle. And it's about their interpersonal relationship. But there's this moment, or long sequence actually, in the center of the movie where Marriott Hartley, who they pick up along the way, she's the daughter of a preacher, and she wants to marry this outlaw. She goes up with them so that she can marry this outlaw. There's this whole sequence where she marries the outlaw. And all these, have you seen this movie?
Yes. Yes, I've seen it, and I like it a lot.
And that sequence is such a foreshadowing of the kind of things that you see in not just later Sam Peckinpah movies, the kind of dirty violence. But
You dropped out.
Am I dropping out?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh no, what do I do?
Just keep talking.
Okay. But that whole sequence is such a kind of a foreshadowing of all that you see in like later stuff, not just his stuff, but like later films. It's just a precursor to the kind of violence that you might see in other movies. And then whenever that sequence is over, it kind of goes back to being this sort of standard Western. I mean, it's a great film all the way through, but that moment just stands out to me as this great sort of Sam Peckinpah moment, because you know that in '62, they probably didn't want to show the kind of things that were in that sequence, just the kind of insinuation of rape and just mass drunkenness and debauchery. And it's all kind of in this one little sequence of the movie. It's weird that makes it my favorite Sam Peckinpah movie, but because it kind of bridges old Westerns and newer Westerns, it's just fascinating in that way. And this movie itself, to bridge it back to this movie, feels kind of like a bridge in some ways to the violence of later movies like Tarantino movies, because it's just so weirdly dark for kind of no good reason in a way. I feel like I'm going on and on, so I don't mean to do that.
About Ride the High Country. Ride the High Country is weirdly dark?
No. I switched to this movie. I switched to our movie.
Oh, we switched to our movie. We switched to Alfredo Garcia. Okay. Well, yes, I agree, Robert. Ride the High Country is a terrific film. And the one that came after it, I think, which is The Ballad of Cable Hogue, it was at least his next Western. I prefer that as far as early Peckinpah Western goes. Robart's in this very colorful role, and it's almost a comedy. It's probably as close as I've ever seen Peckinpah get to comedy is Cable Hogue.
Wow, I've never seen it.
Okay, well you got to see that one. Okay. And again, it's not nearly as over the line in terms of the objectionable content, which the film that we're here to talk about, we're going to talk about it, is Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Yes. And again, that's 1974, and that is, to my understanding, the only film that Peckinpah ever had final cut and like basically full creative control over.
Yeah, I was just kind of reading up on it this morning after I watched it, and indeed, according to the Wikipedia page, it was the movie that he was most happy with because it adhered to his original vision the most closely, if that's good grammar. Right. So yeah, he was happy with it more than he was with any other film, and supposedly it's his most personal, which is funny to say when it's a movie about a guy trying to go fetch the severed head and carry it around of Alfredo Garcia.
Right, and we'll talk about the storyline in just a second. But before we do that, why don't we, give a little background on who Sam Peckinpah was. He did die in the mid-1980s of drug-related causes, if I remember correctly. And he was a man who lived a life of great excess. And he did things very much his way. Apparently, by all accounts that I've ever heard, not an easy person. And in Mexico, where so much of Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia unfolds, it's kind of this no man's land, this dust-covered, sun-drenched, Mexican no man's land area. And Peckinpah was right at home there. And it's something that we just so closely associate with him and his work and his aesthetic these days.
No, absolutely. And in fact, it was completely shot in Mexico, as was the 2 or 3 movies that came before it, because by that point, he had basically kind of exiled himself there. He fell in love with some woman who was Mexican and lived there. And so he would visit her and then just essentially live there. And by the end of his life, I'm not sure if he actually achieved it, but he wanted dual citizenship so that he could live there and just be Sam Peckinpah. I live in Mexico. But I don't know that he achieved that. But yeah, it was definitely his second home, if not his first, and maybe America was his second, because I mean, it's one of the sort of more famous things about his personality is how much he railed against Nixon, for instance, and conservative politics. Mm-hmm. And of course, this movie came out in '74, roughly the same time as all the Watergate stuff was happening. And of course, Vietnam had been boiling over for years, and so he was just kind of a frustrated liberal American. And was much more at home doing his own thing, whatever he wanted to do in Mexico, in old Mexico. So yeah, it's definitely, and one of the things that I noticed before I even read about the movie or him afterwards, this morning watching the movie was, sure, it's extremely gritty. Sure, it shows like the dirt and scum of lived in small villas or villages. It does all that, and it's uncompromising, and it's realism in terms of all that stuff. And yet there's this quality to it that it's not judgmental, and you feel like he really does like what he's shooting, and he likes that his character fits in with this environment that is just so gross and sort of like poverty stricken and decrepit and worn down, just like he felt. I mean, and the character feels. It's actually an incredible example, a great example of one of those movies where, and you hear it all the time, it's almost cliche, but where the environment or the location is a character.
Yeah.
I almost even hate to say that out loud because it just sounds so cliche, but a movie like this and you're watching it, it's so rooted, the character-wise, location-wise, dialogue-wise, premise-wise, with this decrepit kind of feel. And it all goes back to how he felt because of his alcoholism, because of his drug abuse, because of his familial problems with wives and whatnot, and with his attitude toward America at the time. So it's a perfect movie that encapsulates so perfectly and colorfully who he was in 1974.
Yeah, absolutely, and very well said. I was reading about him. I introduced Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia at a bar where we screened the movie for a ZekeFilm screening 2 years ago. And, you know, from my research, I used this book, Bloody Sam, which was the name, you know, bestowed upon him by, you know, his friends and, you know, and I guess the press, you know, Bloody Sam, you know, because, of course, his most famous film, one that came before Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, by the way, was probably The Wild Bunch. I think it's safe to say that's his most celebrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about that one, by the way?
I'll tell you, it's been it's almost like a film admission of sorts because I've seen it, but it's been so long that I actually had to go again to Wikipedia just to kind of glance through the plot, which is it's not a plot-driven movie. It's definitely a character-driven movie, but even so, I couldn't remember much of it. All I remember, honestly, is the feel of the movie, certain key moments in the movie, and a scene where they're all laughing. I remember this, like just cut shots of people laughing, the characters laughing together about some plan that they have or something. But even then, I can't remember what was going on at the time. But I remember loving it because, of course, I love Westerns in general, and it's just such a beautiful example of that era of Western filmmaking, maybe even the greatest of that era of filmmaking, even beyond The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And here's a real film admission, I haven't seen Once Upon a Time in the West.
Wow.
So maybe this compares to that, I'm not sure, but it just really does capture something about that loss of the West, which is a kind of a subpart or subgenre of Westerns that I really gravitate to.
Yeah.
Which is weird to say when I don't remember the plot of one of the greatest examples of that, but nevertheless.
No, you're right, though. You're right. That is what it's really about, however intentional it was. I think, I mean, it's got to take place in, like, I have it in my head, it takes place in 1910. You know, with these suffragettes marching around and everything at the beginning of the movie. I saw The Wild Bunch when it was re-released theatrically in the late 90s with a director's cut. And that was a big deal. And I was like, oh, I've never seen this movie. And you know, the film book that I had from my film school education revered The Wild Bunch. And so I thought, okay, well, I need to go see this. So I did. And I bought the VHS letterbox tape when it came out and watched that a few times. Bought the DVD and maybe watched it once. But yeah, like you, I haven't seen it in a very long time. It's probably been 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, so, but yeah, maybe it's due time for a rewatch.
It's fascinating to go back all the way to even Ride the High Country. And he's dealing with those themes even in that movie, because here's a couple of guys, Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea, and it's their last film as leads, and they're playing cowboys in an era of the West when that sort of thing is passé. So Westerns are kind of becoming passé in the early 60s themselves. It's two actors who are essentially passé in those roles well past then, or well before then. And it's Sam Peckinpah, And
Yes.
there's a through line, a direct connection line between those movies. And it's just amazing that, not amazing, it's interesting, it's fascinating that they all kind of were embraced by one filmmaker, and it becomes his theme. That's the theme of almost his whole body of work, because he just keeps going back to it. It's fascinating.
It is. It's tremendously fascinating, and I just can't get enough of that sort of thing. You know, connecting the dots. You know, from this era to that, and this, you know, how history unfolds before our eyes in film and whatnot, and what it tells us about where we came from and who we are and all of that.
All right.
You know, not to get just so big and grandiose about all this, but you know, Sam Peckinpah is an important figure on the pop culture landscape just because of all these things. You know, there wasn't anyone like him, and I don't know that there ever can be anyone like him again. Certainly not the kind of filmmaker I would have wanted to work for, you know, as a member of the crew.
Right.
Probably not somebody I'd want to be a relative of. There was a story that I read in one of these books about, not Bloody Sam, but a different one, where it was a film executive book. He's talking about when he had all these filmmakers in their offices, and he would walk up and down the hallway, and he heard this thwack, thwack, you know, from down the hall, and it was in Peckinpah's office, and you know, Sam Peckinpah was sitting there at his desk, you know, with his feet up, if I remember right. He's throwing knives at a target that he painted on a piece of wood across the office, and that's what he was doing all day.
That's awesome.
Just chucking big old knives at a target.
That's great. Yeah, the kind of guy. It's funny to try to picture him making movies now, and you would think that maybe they would compare to something like Tarantino or Scorsese or somebody like that, where violence is one of the main conduits for whatever your theme is. But as a person, it's hard to imagine him getting along in Hollywood now, because everything from just people's skittishness about working with someone like that who might be sexist or self-abusive in that way without trying to help him, or he or she, and all those things, plus the fact that we have social media, that those kind of things get out into the world a little bit too easily now. And so who would ever want to work for a guy who's going to behave that way on set? Whereas before, it's sort of like the tail end of the era where you've got guys like John Huston and these really robust men of the world who also make films, you know, and you sort of accept that these guys are going to be these bigger than life kind of characters themselves. Not that Tarantino isn't that, but I think even Tarantino probably knows that he has to behave himself, at least to a certain extent, in order to make his next film, if he's going to be given, you know, the money again. Because I just don't think people necessarily, you know, put up with that much anymore. I'm generalizing, because obviously there's lots of terrible people that work in this town and get away with murder. Maybe not, you know, murder, but I like that pregnant pause I actually accidentally gave that. It's like, Robert, do you know something?
Yeah.
No, I don't know anything.
Well, this is Sam Peckinpah we're talking about. A man, you know, he liked his guns and knives, man, you know. And so, but no, not to further insinuate anything. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia apparently was, according to this book, by Sam Peckinpah standards, a smooth shoot, which is to say it wasn't without chaos and craziness. The story of the film, let's just break this down. It's a pretty straightforward plot, I would say.
Do you want me to? I just saw it this morning. I think I could probably condense it pretty quickly.
Yeah, go ahead. You just watched it this morning. But yeah, it does star Warren Oates as our hero, and take it away.
Well, I mean, the basic plot is, of course, probably anyone listening this far has probably seen it or wants to see it. So obviously there's going to be spoilers in this. But the bottom line is El Jefe is kind of a big money man down in Mexico, and his daughter has become pregnant by a gigolo named Alfredo Garcia. And so when she comes into the plantation, or whatever it's called, the hacienda, and she's pregnant, he says to his henchmen, "Bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia, and you'll get $1 million. Whoever brings me that head." So a couple of his henchmen go off, and they're like interrogating people, like, "Have you seen this man?" to all the kind of surrounding small villages. And they stumble upon this little hole-in-the-wall bar owned by Warren Oates' character, Benny. Well, Benny claims that he doesn't know anything about it, so but he'll look into it. But he actually does know, because his girlfriend, Alita. Is that the right? Did I say that name right? Yes, Alita. So basically he takes her on the road to go to where they believe Alfredo Garcia is already buried, because she claims that he was in a car accident based on his drunk driving, or his drinking. So they go to his grave. At the grave, he says, "Well, I have to take this head." She says, "Don't do it. I have to take the head because the money that we get for this is gonna fund our lives, and I want you to marry me, Alita." And they break down crying because she's always wanted to marry him, blah, blah, blah. So then the rest of the movie is him trying to get the head back to El Jefe so they can get the money. And then things kind of unwind from there. Along the way, there's tons of gunfights. There's, of course, a severed head in a bag, surrounded by flies at all times. There are bad guys after him from El Jefe. There are other guys who know about the reward that are after him as well. So if I could be describing something that's made today, maybe not a Tarantino film, but sort of sub-Tarantino action film, that's sort of the plot, but it hadn't really been done like this. Obviously, there have been gangster films and stuff with similar kinds of plots, but not like this. And it's almost like this movie, the plot that I just told you, is sort of the template for a whole subgenre of action films now. Everything from Japanese films, action films, to American films, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the basic plot, and a lot of blood, letting a lot of bullets fly, a lot of death. I believe 16 people. Benny himself claims to have killed 16 people along the way. So yeah, it's a fun movie to watch if you like that kind of stuff, because everything that we've just described about how gritty it is and how dirty and the squalid nature of the environment, and then that kind of plot, and then those kind of visuals. If you don't like any of what we're describing, you probably won't like it at all. But if you love early 70s films that just really capture the time in a very interesting, visually interesting, and character interesting way, it's a great movie. It's just a great movie.
It is, and it's. I find it to just be unforgettable. It's really stuck with me, and Warren Oates himself in the film is this kind of lean figure, and he's wearing a light-colored suit, and as he makes his way through, it just gets dirtier and dirtier, and he is just perpetually suntanned and beaded with sweat, and he's wearing Sam Peckinpah's actual sunglasses. Absolutely. And carrying a gun and driving these beat up cars through the desert, and these two guys that he has to deal with, these bounty hunters. They are colorful characters, aren't they?
They are. They're. It's interesting. I was listening to some of the commentary, and one of the guys on the commentary. By the way, the three guys that are talking on the commentary on the Keynote Over disc is each of them have written books about Sam Peckinpah. When I saw you hold up the book, I was like, was that one of them? So I looked at it. No.
I wish, though. I'd love to read their books.
But they talk about those two characters specifically because they're going around together, and there's just a couple of moments where you might think, I don't know if Sam Peckinpah put this in just to kind of make the bad guys seem even weirder by early 70s standards, but there's sort of a homosexual kind of tone to them. Not that they're flamboyant or anything like that, but just their camaraderie is a little that. So, but yeah, they're not colorful in that way, but they're colorful in that they're acted well. And one, I can't remember the actors' names, but I've seen both of them in a million movies. So they're sort of like character actors. And So they're going around. They're constantly like several steps behind, as would happen in this kind of plot. But yeah, they are fascinating, and it's interesting because they're well dressed. They're obviously rich guys coming from a rich person, you know, doing the bounty hunter for them, work for them, for a rich person. And so it's just interesting to see these guys in their slick haircuts and their nice jackets and outfits against this really dirty environment, including Warren Oates. And to see them stand side by side is a lot of fun because, as you said, he has that sort of like early 70s. Almost every film of that era seems like there's like a patina of sweat over everyone's forehead, but he more so than them. He's got this oily mustache and his hair is kind of slicked back, and he's been through the mud and has no chance to bathe or clean ever. So he's just a mess. He's a total mess by the end of the movie. One side note, since we're talking about that, just I kept thinking of Sam Peckinpah and his writer, whose name I'm ashamed to say escapes my mind. As a writer, I should know this. But I just imagine them sitting in a room talking about the story and laughing hysterically, even though it's a very dark movie. Let's have a movie where a guy has to take a bag into a car and make sure that no one steals it, and he falls into the mud and he's shooting people, and just the way you have to describe the story sounds so ridiculous. I can just imagine them laughing hysterically that they're going to make it into a serious action film. It's fun to think about that.
Frank Kowalski.
Is that right?
That's the writer credited on this, and he's also the one who has the stories about him in here.
Okay.
Where they are basically sitting around talking about it was some kind of rape case where you know, the rapist would, you know, perpetrate his crimes you know, in front of a significant other, and then, you know, what's the significant other to do? In a Peckinpah film, they say he takes up arms and goes and blows these guys away. That's the justice that we're talking about in this universe. And you know, they started off on that kind of idea at that level, you know, that very visceral, gut, horrid level, and you know, unspool into this thing about you know, having to sever the head of a corpse,
right?
You know, which the Alita character was very morally opposed to, right? She had a lot of problems with this. It was like a religious thing, yes.
Well, right. It was like a desecration of the grave was like, you might as well just kill yourself too.
Yeah. So she was, you know, having a lot of problems that this was going to be what they based their future upon, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And you know, so that to me, you know, so of course you could argue that she is correct in all of that, because things don't go well. They can't.
Well, yeah, I mean, everything does spiral completely out of control once he's taken the head. The truth is he hasn't taken the head, because what happens is, first of all, the funniest moment in the movie, if you want to call it funny, is kind of ties into what you just said, which is I'm thinking the two through lines are these two going to get together, and is Warren Oates going to get the head to El Jefe to get the money? And these two storylines strike each other. The nexus is the moment when he's standing over Alfredo Garcia's grave, and it's just hilarious if you really think about this. Just what you said. The rest of their lives depends on whether he's going to disobey her, basically, and cut off the head of a guy for money. That's funny. It's just funny because it's like it's a romantic story in a sense that one string is romantic, but the crux of, like, if you look at a romantic comedy, is he gonna quit his job to go with her to Florida or something? You know, that's the typical kind of, you know, sort of cliche kind of thing. But in this one, is he gonna cut off the head of this guy and take it back for ransom money or whatever? That's funny. It's very dark, but it's very funny as well. And Peckinpah laughing in the office going over this script note is probably would be a sight to see.
Probably. And you know, going back to the two men that are chasing them, the bounty hunters, the vaguely homosexual bounty hunters, Robert Webber and Gig Young. Does that sound right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, the two actors that played them, which I just checked that while you were talking. The here's a bizarre admission of mine that I oftentimes conflate their vaguely homosexual assassins with the ones in Diamonds Are Forever, the James Bond film, which is Sean Connery's final James Bond film. There's these two guys, and I can't remember their names. It's like, they're very erudite in their addressing of one another. Mr. Slip and Mr. Slap, or whatever their names were. That's what they call themselves. And they have a fight, and they stroll off away from the camera in the desert, holding hands in Diamonds Are Forever.
I've seen that movie, but again, it's one of those that goes so far back. That doesn't even register at all. Yeah. But of course, the thing goes. You think about North by Northwest and the late great Martin Landau,
yeah,
God rest his soul, and James Mason, God rest his soul too. Sure.
Sure.
They have an implied relationship as well, and so it's an interesting thing to look back at as the older eras and generations of filmmakers who want to use homosexuality as something to make bad guys even creepier.
Yeah.
You can't really do that now.
No, and it's just talking about marginalizing people. Holy cow! It's like we're going to be more explicit that this lifestyle is a thing. Okay, in movies, here's how we're gonna do it. They're psycho assassins, huh? Yeah, that seems to be the thinking, and that's a way of making your film provocative.
Sure.
So, we deal in that with Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, a film that leaves no provocation unexplored.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and again, this is a film that is very bloody and very, no shortage of nudity, no shortage of, humiliations inflicted on this poor woman in the movie. And again, major spoilers here. She lasts a halfway through the film.
Yeah, well, the moment where he's deciding whether to dig up the grave, there's a bit, as I mentioned, it's sort of the nexus of the two storylines. Is he going to take the head? Is he not going to take the head? It's not resolved really in that moment, because while he's making that decision and you feel like he's about to do it, he actually gets whacked on the head by a shovel. And when he wakes up, he's half buried himself in Alfredo Garcia's grave. Underneath him, unfortunately, is his now dead fiancée, and the beheaded corpse of Alfredo Garcia. So it's a pretty gruesome scene, but also I have to say, I was struck in that scene by the latitude that Sam Peckinpah gave Warren Oates to be a good actor in that scene, because it's not just he finds his fiance's body buried, but he weeps over her and then decides that she's not really dead and is talking to her and slapping her and like trying to wake her up. And then finally, again, deciding that indeed she is dead, and now he must avenge her death. So the whole sort of motivation shifts mightily at that moment. But the scene itself has some really, and the whole movie is actually chock full of great moments for Warren Oates to be a good actor. And you think of Warren Oates, he's been in a ton of movies as a character, side character, including in Ride the High Country. He's a great, really sniveling, disgusting character in that show, in the movie as well. But he shows himself to be worthy of a leading man role in that movie. And it's a shame he didn't get more opportunities after. I think he was in a few where he was a leading man, but not really a whole lot. So yeah, so that scene, of course, spoilers again, she's dead, but it does give him a chance to be a good actor. And the movie deepens at that moment, because you really get his motivation at that point. It's stronger than just, hey, I want to make money. And I don't care what I have to do to get that money. It's more like, they killed her? Because it was a pointless murder. There's no reason at all for her to have to die for this story. And so it just makes it obscene that he has to do that now. That the reason he's going to go forward with the whole rest of the plot is because of what they've done senselessly. So it's a great moment.
Agreed, and it just really rips your heart out, and it's something that I didn't see coming at all. It's so unconventional of a choice in a film like this, and then just the fact that he becomes this much more unraveled. You know, this is not an okay person to begin with. You know, in his head, here he's gone from here on out. He's going to, you know, okay, it's like this is the thing. In order to avenge her, it's like, oh, now I'm really going to get that head, you know, and he goes charging off and spends the rest of the movie, you know, wreaking his bloody vengeance, as it were, I suppose. He's the, you know, and so fantastic sequence, by the way. This one in the street, right where the cars are in the street and they're having a showdown.
Yes.
You know, later in the film.
Yeah, the two guys that we mentioned, the two henchmen are bounty hunters, come by and pretend to be just like lost travelers, but they kind of see what's going down. There's like a scramble for who has the head, and it's just like, I mean, obviously the head is in a bag, but nevertheless they're tossing his head around, and yeah, it becomes kind of this melee in the middle of the street, and it is but to Warren Oates's character, to Benny's behavior. After that moment, he really does lose it. He's never a character that you really like. He's swarthy, he's smarmy, he's oily, he's all those kind of epithets from the very first time you see him, and he's out for himself and dirty, and so and he just says things that don't really make you feel good. But so you never really like the guy. But once he's past that moment where he finds his fiancée dead, he loses it, and he's talking to the head almost into like an actual voiceover, but through his own lips, talking to the head about his love for her and about what he's going to do next. And the choices he makes over the course of the next half hour, 45 minutes, or however long that is, are so suspect, because when you think about it, they're almost always rooted in a kind of morality. For instance, when he finally gets to El Jefe and he hands the head over and takes the money, he says, basically he says, I can't believe, and then El Jefe says, well, just get rid of the head, give it to the pigs. He says, throw the head to the pigs. And Benny says something along the lines of, I did all this and I got this head, and my wife to be was murdered or killed, and I'm just going to toss that into and you're going to give me money for it. It just seems so wrong, basically. The morality of how it went down in that final office scene is pure in his own mind, but he doesn't really have a problem with the fact that the football, the MacGuffin, if you will, and the whole movie is a head that he's been carrying around for half an hour, a few days. But this, when it comes to his fiancée and her demise, and how he's not going to take money for that now because of El Jefe's behavior and attitude toward the whole thing, is a morality. It's his own morality, but it's so mixed up. It's like these two kinds of moralities kind of at play, and he's confused. He's a completely confused guy, and he meets out that confusion and yet more gunplay at the end. All very colorful, but definitely a mixed up movie morality-wise, which again takes us all the way back to Sam Peckinpah and where he was in his own world and his own life at that point. It's like you can be moral regarding those things that affect you directly, and if you're not moral about those things, then you're not a good man. But you can be immoral about the things that don't necessarily affect you or that may even hurt other people. It's a very fascinating kind of takeaway from the movie that seems to kind of relate to who he was, Peckinpah, at the time, and the kind of things that he was trying to figure out in his own head at the time. I mean, I think he had just left another wife at that point, or a wife had left him or something, and he was just completely washed out on alcohol and drug abuse by that point. And so he was a messed up, confused, and sad individual. And so to have the character have any morality at all is a small miracle. He's not a sociopathic person in the movie. He has love, and he has a desire for things to point to something that is some kind of redemption for his massive effort to get to El Jefe. But nevertheless, there's still a lot of screwed up motivations going on in his head at the same time. So again, a great movie because there's so much going on that you can think about and talk about.
Absolutely, and that's the value in it. I think that separates it from so many other films that maybe we're just holding on to because they embody a certain grit and patina of 1970s, era gone by, badassery or whatever. We like that. Some of us are drawn to those films sometimes. This one is above that. It is that. And it's, again, it's so much just a film that just wallows so deeply in its darkness and depravity. And yet, yeah, there's something there. There's a moral, a warped morality trying to inform what's going on. And yet, it's so much, it just feels so pure and unabashed in its artistic footing.
Yeah.
It's one of these movies of the 70s, and any time, I don't think it just, it can't be denied. It's the movie that it set out to be, and it horrifies people. I remember listening to the commentary track of Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous, where Cameron Crowe was talking about his mother, who Frances McDormand plays his mother's surrogate in Almost Famous. So, of course, he gets to talk about his real mother on the commentary track. And he says that, his mother would take him to all these movies. And, of course, when he was a kid, she was undiscriminating about the movies. She took him to see Sam Peckinpah movies sometimes because they were considered important culturally.
Yeah.
So he was taken to see Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, and
as like a child.
As a child, yeah, as like a teenage kid, a young adolescent or something. Yeah, which again, I'm like, what? But yeah, the story goes that his mom in the theater, after a half hour of this, stands up in her seat in the theater and yells, "Bring me the head of Sam Peckinpah," and storms out. Yeah,
that's great.
So I remember that all the time. In fact, I heard that story before I ever even saw the movie.
That reminds me, just an anecdote from Robert's life, very short. It was my turn to go to pick the movie. And I was living at the time with my mom and my grandmother, and my sister and brother lived in town. So, and I was probably 20, and I chose. It dates me a little bit, but I chose Cape Fear, Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear, because I was just getting into film, and I knew who Scorsese was and other movies he had made and seen a couple maybe, but didn't really understand that if you're going to go see a Martin Scorsese movie, what you're definitely going to be in for. So I went to see Cape Fear with my grandmother and my mother, and they're sitting maybe 5 or 6 rows behind me and my sister and brother. My sister and brother are older than I am. There's the scene where De Niro, as the bad guy, as the released convict, Max Cady, takes a woman home and bites her ear off, or scratches her face just violently or something. I forget what that was exactly. Well, after that scene, of course, I'm like, oh, what have I done? I'm enjoying it in a way because I'm film savvy enough to know that what's going on and kind of put that wall between me and the violence. But my mother and grandmother, not so much. Well, I got a tap on the shoulder, and I turned around as my mom in the theater, and she says, "We're going to be outside." So my mom and grandmother walk into the lobby. I don't know where they went, but they left us to finish the movie. I guess they had that much respect for us. Who knows? And then afterwards, got a little bit of a scolding, like, "Why didn't you at least check out the trailer or something before we?" But it's not exactly Bring Me the Head of Sam Peckinpah. But it's one of those moments where maybe you don't really know what you're getting into. Maybe you should check it out first or something. But,
good advice.
But regarding the movie in the 70s, in the early 70s, I love the fact that this movie exists at all, but I'm glad it was made when it was made, because as disturbing and as dark as we've described it, it's still kind of beholden to a lot of what you could see or say or do in an early 70s movie. They were getting away with a lot of stuff even in 70, 71. I think Dirty Harry was even 71. It had a lot of ultra violence in it.
I think you're right.
Nevertheless, it's not like it would be today. So if the movie was made even 10 years later, can you imagine what it would look like? If it was made in 2017, the level of sociopathic violence that you would just allow the character to get away with without those moments of human remorse or human hoped for, you know, redemption or whatever you want to call it, that might not be there, and it might still be perfectly acceptable to a crowd these days. I'm not trying to like condemn 2017 crowds, but just, you know, I think it's a given that you can get away with a lot more, and audiences will still love it these days, more so than in 74. So I'm glad that it was made when it was made.
Yeah, any such effort made today would be considered an exercise in style, and that's probably all it really would be. Right. I think of, you know, Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill Volume 2 is a film that I really quite like. But you can't deny that, you know, as far as exercise in style goes, you know, these films, the Kill Bill 2 films are certainly that. And there's a part in Volume 2 where she goes, or Uma Thurman's character, ends up in a Mexican bar, which to me is something straight out of Peckinpah. Yeah. That's the Peckinpah moment. That we can, those of us that are film savvy enough can look at that and say, okay, this is probably going somewhere bloody, and it's Tarantino. We already know it will.
Right.
I want to talk about, you know, just give a mention to a film that is probably the closest thing we have to Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, subsequent to it, which is a very little seen film that Tommy Lee Jones made back about 10 or so years ago, called The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada.
I saw that. Yeah. I love it.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. I don't remember much about it, but I can see I can see where you're going.
Yeah, it's one of the best films of its year, and with a title like that, you know, The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, you know, it's reminiscent of Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia in a way. And again, we're dealing with a man on a mission to retrieve a dead body. In this case, it's the entire body, and it's all the more, you know, explicit about it. In Alfredo Garcia, I don't know that we ever see the severed head. It's just this head in a bag, the bloody bag. It's burlap and flies flying around it all the time, and he's just lugging this bloody burlap bag around. You know, it's one of the great like key props in movie history. The bloody bag in Alfredo Garcia.
Right.
In Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, he's got this corpse that he's got to keep packing with dry ice constantly throughout the film. And, you know, again, it's just, you know, the corpse keeps getting reburied. I don't remember a whole lot of details about the plot of it, but again, the feel and the vibe of it, it's more of a Western than even Alfredo Garcia is, but is, again, Tommy Lee Jones starring and directing. And, you know, talking about it makes me want to revisit it. It's a very rich film.
I think it might, at least it was for a while, it was streaming on Netflix. And you talking about it now makes me want to see it again too. It's the tone I remember is different because it feels more respectful of the dead. I mean, it's about him wanting the dead person to be buried where he should be buried. So it's like a very respectful movie, but yeah, and I love the Western feel of it. I'm like you, I don't remember much of the plot beyond that. But yeah, I love that movie. I love Tommy Lee Jones in a Western of any kind. He just belongs in a Western.
And it might, of the films he's directed, it's probably his best one. It's something that, you know, at the time I said it's Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada. It's Sam Peckinpah meets Flannery O'Connor in a Western.
That's perfect.
Yeah, where it's Peckinpah, and of course, and Tommy Lee Jones is a Flannery O'Connor expert.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently he wrote his doctoral thesis about her or something.
What?
But yeah, anyway, apparently Gaddis Estrada also, it has the harsh terrain of Alfredo Garcia. It was shot on Tommy Lee Jones' property. So apparently he owns a lot of property.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, tumbleweed infested, you know, dusty, you know, hilly area where you clop through there with a, you know, whatever. But
that seems to be like, it matches what he looks like. You know what I mean?
right. No, it's perfect. So yeah. So anyway, there's that film. But yeah, we'll wrap this up. If you don't have any other thoughts about Garcia.
The only other thing, obviously, you keep talking about it for an hour, but I just kind of going back to the thought of when it was made. I like thinking about it in the context of other movies like of that era, where you could get away with movies that are just like completely bleak at the very end, like the character doesn't even survive the movie. The you know, the goals that you set up for him at the beginning, maybe he even meets those, but still dies or something. I think of movies like Night Moves. From roughly that time as well, if not the same year, I can't remember, where nothing is resolved. It's a shot of Gene Hackman in a boat, if I remember, and the plot has not been resolved, or he has not been resolved, or something. But the movie that I think weirdly matches this in tone, even though it's like completely different, is The Long Goodbye, which came out a year before, because of the kind of road movie feel of it, where he's like, and the not mystery. It's not a mystery in Alfredo Garcia. It's more of a, I got to get this thing and I got to keep away from these. It's much more of an action movie than a mission. Nevertheless, it kind of has that. They even mention it in the commentary, kind of a picaresque feel, because it feels like it's a road movie in a way. It's like getting from A to B across all this massive terrain, and I don't know, just the kind of floaty quality that the plot has. And you don't really know what's going to happen because of that early 70s mix of, we can get away with what we want to, but we're still kind of beholden to certain things, and you find those things plot-wise in the movie, but also we're doing this, and we're going to let a scene play a little bit too long, or we're going to let a character die that you don't think should die or doesn't belong dying. Those are hallmark tentpole sort of things of early 70s movies. I just love thinking about this movie against a movie like Long Goodbye in that same era, and how they kind of talk to each other. It'd make a great double feature, I think.
Yeah, they really would, and that's a great observation too. You know, Long Goodbye, of course, is like considered a neo-noir.
Yeah.
Of you know, who's the detective character in that? It's not Sam Spade. It's
Philip Marlowe.
Philip Marlowe, yeah, with you know, Robert Altman directing.
Yeah.
So again, you know, another wild card, you know, off the hook, doing things his own way filmmaker in the early 1970s. Nice connection there, Robert. That's why we bring you in.
Well, I'm a nerd.
Oh, well, hey, I want to say one other thing. At the end of Alfredo Garcia, talking about the morality of it and just the emptiness of, you know, the all-consuming darkness of what's gone on, and the kind of point of no return that this character has gone to. You know, he's made it to the finish line with his severed head, and he's puts it down there. It's a moment that really made the movie for me in a weird way. You know, he's there to get the money. There's a moment there where he turns to leave and doesn't take the money. He's going to forget it. He's leave it there. Exactly. You know, and he kind of, you know, remembers, it's like, oh, you know, oh yeah, the money, sure, you know. And he has a line about, you know, there's no good in anything, or you or me, you know.
I wrote that down.
Yeah.
It was earlier in the movie. It's a similar line earlier in the movie when she's talking about, actually she's talking about her morality, and she says, you can't desecrate a grave. And he says, don't give me that crap. Nothing sacred about a, oops, I'm getting old. Nothing sacred about a hole in the ground or the man that's in it. Yeah. Like, wow, that is bleak.
Yeah.
He's dead. He's just dead. Don't. He says even the Catholic Church cuts off the fingers of saints, and this guy ain't no saint. You know, I'm no saint. Yeah, definitely. There's a conflict of morality in the car in that moment.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. So just you know, it's this getting that money is what everything's all about when he finally, you know, has made it to the finish line. Clearly getting the money wasn't what it was all about.
Yeah. Not by that point.
Yeah, not by that point. He almost leaves without it. I just treasure that instant, you know, because it kind of says it all.
I think so. Well, it should be said though that he actually does take the money after that, but he's blown away some bad guys.
Yeah,
by that.
Of course. So yeah, Kino Lorber has released "Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia" on DVD. If you're interested in a Blu-ray of the film, that's a little harder to come by, but it's out there from a competing label, Twilight Time, which is owned by one of the guys that does the commentary track. Nick Redman owns Twilight Time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's that's his outfit. But yeah, Kino Lorber's disc has been released out there into the world. It is available at a decent price on your various online shopping venues. If you're interested in having a copy of this movie, I recommend it highly. Robert recommends it highly. You can, you know, if you're a Sam Peckinpah fan, I think you have to have "Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia" on your shelf.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Robert, thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're gonna sign off, everybody. ZekeTalk is our regular ZekeFilm talk show. It can be found on our YouTube channel at the name ZekeFilm, ZekeFilm, and our website is, of course, ZekeFilm.org. And you can go there for all the latest film reviews and some reviews of some pretty off-the-wall vintage films released on Blu-ray.
Yes.
We're having a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah.
So anything coming up for you, Robert? As far as reviews?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I'm very proud to say that I will be writing very soon about these two movies. Will that come out like the right way? It's two Elvis movies. One is Clambake, and one is Frankie and Johnny, which, funny enough, I've never heard of Frankie and Johnny. So I picked these two. So they'll be talked about in a review very shortly, probably in the next week or so. So, and those are both by Kino Lorber. And one has a commentary track on it, the other does not. And I'm looking forward to, I've never really researched Elvis. And so I'm looking forward to kind of reading up on the context of these movies. I mean, they're late 60s. It's roughly around the time of, you know, The Wild Bunch and all these other movies we kind of talked about in the late 60s, where things are just so much in turmoil and heavy and Easy Rider and all this stuff. And then these two Elvis movies.
Right.
So you wonder why that happened, you know, and I'm kind of interested to read up on that. So that's coming.
How could it not happen? It's
it's Elvis. Come on.
Right.
I love Elvis, and so I'm not going to be putting him down in any way. I love Elvis. I love the fact that he made these movies.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And I will be reviewing, well, a long overdue review of a pair of Thunderbirds films.
Ooh.
Thunderbirds Argo and Thunderbirds 6, both from the mid to late 1960s. That'll be the next one that I'll have to knock off the list, I think, along with Silkwood and Duel in the Sun. So stay tuned, everybody. Lots of great stuff on our site. You can subscribe to ZekeTalk, this show you're watching right now, or perhaps listening to, which again is something I still want to figure out how to do the audio version. But yeah, ZekeTalk is available if you subscribe to the ZekeFilm YouTube channel, so please do that, and we appreciate all your support and everything that all the good thoughts and you have for us. So, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say goodbye.
We're saying goodbye.
Yeah, I'm really tired. It's awfully hot in here. I did it on purpose so I could get up the beads of sweat on my face that Warren Oates.
Look very early 70s, Jim.
I've tried. I tried. This is the best I can do. I got my Scorpion, and yeah. So but now it's seriously, it's time to turn the fans back on and get a Gatorade. So I thank you, Robert. Have a good day, and
you as well. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, peace. And now I'm going to stop this.